and thank you for joining us for Mardi Gras tonight. I am Lauren Anderson, the president of the board of directors of the New Haven Free Public Library. We are gathered to celebrate tonight the library and some of the people who make it the amazing community gem that it is. The poet Rita Dove has described libraries so beautifully as an arena of possibility, a window into the soul, and a door onto the world. It's a great description for our libraries here in New Haven that make so much possible for so many people. We really, really wish that we could all be together tonight with food and music and dancing, but we want you to know that we are so optimistic, yes, about gathering together in person next year, but also about all the amazing things on the horizon for the library in 2022 and beyond.
And let me talk a little bit about some of those things coming up on the horizon. This is John Jessen. I'm your city librarian. We are so excited and so thankful for all of our sponsors and all of the people who have supported us this year and the years past. We're thankful for all those little readers that are out there checking out books and reading books. And we are so excited. We'll be bringing this summer, you'll see the bookmobile crisscrossing the city as it was doing last summer. This summer, we're also going to add a book bike. So that's going to be fun. We're going to be all around in different venues and different events happening in the city and the neighborhood near yours soon enough. The other thing we have happening right now, it's kind of a spring cleaning. I know people have been anxious because of COVID. The New Haven Free Public Library is now an official passport office site. So if you need to get a passport to fly away to someplace exotic or just to leave the United States, please come to the New Haven Free Public Library to do that. And the last thing I want to mention is you might have seen it today from the mayor's press conference about the budget, but we have the very first steps toward expanding the hours of the library to include Sunday hours. So we're very excited. We have a long ways kind of to go to work out all those details, but we're very confident and we are very happy about this new arrangement for the library.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Lauren. I'm Mike Moran, president of the New Haven Free Public Library Foundation. And of course, we're also excited to be coming here from the new Stetson branch, soon to open to the public, open to all of you very soon. We want to say thank you to all of the hundreds and hundreds of donors and champions who made this library possible. Together, we raised $2 million for furnishings and collections here at Stetson and for the library's permanent endowment. Those donations are so important, and we encourage you tonight to consider making a special donation online to your New Haven Free Public Library in celebration of Mardi Gras, in celebration of where we've been and where we're going. Just 10 days ago, February 21st, marked the 135th anniversary of your New Haven Free Public Library that opened in 1887. This is a place with a great history, but more importantly, it's a place with a great future. Thanks to you, thanks to the mayor and the board of alders, thanks to all the residents and readers, thanks to donors, thanks to all who gather around New Haven and beyond online tonight and support this library every day. Take a look now at a very brief video that shows how your library is helping make this a more beloved community. Enjoy this video.
Well, I like lots of things about the library. First of all, that there's lots of books. I like that. I also like that, like, even if I'm not looking for something, I can always find a book that looks good.
My kids love coming to the library. You find so many different people that come to the library, so many different walks of life. And just even in the elevator or in the lobby, like, everyone interacts and they all just want a place to come together, you know? And just like how I said with my kids and I, like, it would be our warm spot to come. I think other people come into the library because it's warm.
You know, any community that's going to thrive has to have a thriving public library system. We think about the future and just how critically important the library system is to a city. I think that there are specific agencies that will always say are the critical needs. Sometimes a library will be put in that category and sometimes not. I would argue that absolutely that we are one of the foundational aspects of this city, and it would be very hard for any city to thrive without having a really good library system. And that library system is a system that shapes itself to its community.
So yes, during the last 2 years, we really have had to pivot in the way we do programming and the way that we serve our patrons. Young Minds especially has taken to virtual story times. We also are doing Take and Make crafts. Take and Makes are just kind of little kits that you can bring home and work on a fun art project. We've also been really great with curbside pickup. We, during the pandemic, and we still do, we take our lists every morning, we pick out our books, we bring them down to circulation for our parents to pick up.
We've really ramped up our online services, and then we've put that together with all of our programs. And so we have workforce development programs coming up. We're going to have some great programs for teens in the future because we know they need jobs. And so as the mayor has called upon for the city, the library is going to do its part also to help bring jobs to the teenagers and other folks needing jobs in the city of New Haven. We have family literacy programs. We're very excited about some of the initiatives that we have coming up with our adults and families and children's. So we are helping people thrive. We're helping people succeed and bringing them, what it is that they're looking for, what they need.
So thrilled to welcome to our virtual Mardi Gras stage two amazing poets, giants of American literature, social justice advocates, and thought leaders. We have with us tonight for a conversation Reginald Dwayne Betts and Honorée Fanonne Jeffers. Dwayne Betts, there's so many things we could say about this wonderful human being. He's a poet, an essayist, a criminal justice reform activist, and a 2021 Genius Fellow. He's also a beloved member of our local community. And if you have not picked up a copy of Felon yet, his most recent collection, you absolutely need to. Honorée Fanonne Jeffers is a celebrated poet, novelist, essayist, and the author of one of the most acclaimed books of this last year, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which promises to be a book that will be celebrated for many, many years to come. Take it away, Honorée and Dwayne.
Cool. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Honorée. How's it going?
It's going well. Nobody could see me backstage, but I was just grinning. I love librarians. I love libraries. When I was a little girl, oh my God, librarians were my best friend. And so I don't think I've ever met a librarian I didn't love. I really don't.
So look, I feel like a lot of people say that, and like a lot of people are lying, all right?
A lot of people are lying, but I'm not. I love.
But this is how I know you aren't lying, and this takes me to the book actually, because this is how I know you aren't lying. You prominently feature librarians in this book right here, and this is a lovely book, right? The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. Like, a lot of people say they love libraries, but they don't find a way to show that love through their creative work. So I guess I should just ask you this question first. What made you, like, how did you come to recognize the sort of central aspect that research and a broad, expansive definition of research, though, right? From the oral tradition of like Lydia listening to Uncle Root, but then also her learning from her professor how to do scholarly research, to finally her digging in the crates herself,
Ailey.
Right?
It's Ailey, not Lydia. But it's the whole
shit.
No,
I
there's
won't.
a whole bunch of people in the book.
It is.
So.
It's not just a whole bunch of people, but also Lydia is my
There are
heart.
people
Though.
love Lydia.
Yeah, Lydia is my heart, and so maybe as part of Ellie wants to bring Lydia back to life, and I think I do too. But what made you invest so much of the work into this notion of librarians?
Well, like I said, when I was a little girl and I was a very awkward child, you've known me for a long time, so you've seen my public persona evolve, right? But just who I am, when I'm not doing these things, I'm very awkward. I've always been socially awkward. And the library was the place when I was a little girl that I just felt special. I grew up partially in Durham, North Carolina, and then Atlanta, Georgia. And things were still de facto segregated when I was growing up in Durham. And so our library was the Black library. And so when I would go into the library, the librarians would call my name. You're younger than me. I don't know if you remember this show called Cheers, but there
Yeah, I remember Cheers.
right. And
Everybody want to go. Yeah,
right,
where everybody knows your name.
Norm, when he would walk in, and that's what they would do with me. And they would call my name, and they make me feel special and like a superstar. And being smart was just so important in the library, being a reader. And they would save the books for me. And so that was when I was a little girl. And then when my parents separated and my mother moved me and my middle sister, Cece is now late, to Atlanta. Cece was a freshman at Spelman. I was a freshman in high school. And then our oldest sister, Val, was at Spelman as well. When she moved us down there, Mama would take me to the library because she was in graduate school getting her doctorate.
Is that cheating? I always wanted to ask people, and this is what I loved about the book.
Is that cheating?
I'm gonna tell you what I mean. Is it cheating, right? Like, so I was a little bit jealous of Allie and Lydia and Coco because it was a very rich tradition. And one beautiful thing in the book is that you muddied up that rich tradition. So it wasn't just this like perfect intellectual Black Southern family. Like they dealt with drama, they struggled, and they fought. But I wonder for you, how do you feel like was it like the cheat code to have such an early vibrant experience with libraries first independently and then as the child of a graduate student?
That's the thing. One of the things that you probably don't even know about me, I hid from people up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that we lived in Section 8 housing. And so while I do have this sort of rich intellectual background, I also have a very deep connection to poverty, not just seeing it from afar. We lived in Section 8 housing. We ate what they call commodity foods out here in Oklahoma, but we called it government food, the government cheese and all of that. And so I think it was always sort of, and if people look at my work, there's always sort of this highbrow intellectual, but then this sort of folk experience, right? And so that's always the line that I tread. So even though my mother was a deep intellectual, as was my father, then on the weekends, we'd go and visit my grandma Florence, and grandma only went to like 7th grade. And my mother's father was, I don't think the word illiterate is kind or polite. So I just say he couldn't read or write. And he died before I was born. So I always had this sort of connection to research in 2 different ways, and history in 2 different ways.
I mean, we could talk about you as a poet, but actually, I honestly, I tend to think Oprah. Once she didn't pick my book for the book club, I was like, fuck this book club. No, but like
in public too much.
Oh shit, my
You
bad.
know I cuss, but I always keep it on the DL when
No,
I cuss. Okay.
no, but like the funny thing is, and I love Oprah, and I love
Yes,
Oprah's book
I
club for
love
what it does
Oprah.
for
Oprah's a
literature.
goddess.
But
Hmm.
but I don't know how often I deeply love new books that she picked. And I'm realizing listening to you talk about more of your family history, how generous this book is in terms of I think it's really hard to write about people who you might dislike. So
Oh,
so Lydia, one, I think that is probably the best portrayal of somebody that's struggling with addiction that I've ever read. But
thank you
also
so
through
much.
her, yeah, but and through her though, it's also a lovely portrayal of some of the guys that were the catalyst to her addiction.
Yes.
And I actually really appreciate the complexity there. And I see that came from your experiences and also just your deep intellect and thoughtfulness as a writer. But what I wonder is how might you imagine like this work hitting the people that I want to read it, who work at EJI, who work at
Well,
public
well,
defender.
one of the things that's an excellent question, Barbara, because one of the things that I wanted is I wanted, first of all, I wrote this book for Black people, specifically Black women. I want everybody to read my book, but the love songs that are that are referred to Du Bois's love songs, these are for my people. And
Right.
so I wanted people who only read like urban fiction, I wanted them to see characters that they connected to. And then
Yeah.
I wanted historians to be like, okay, you did that, girl. You did it.
It-
I see all that goes into that. I wanted, as we say down south, from the rooter to the tutor. I wanted the whole spectrum of Black people to read this book, to see things in, for example, working class people. That's what I know. Yes, I have a pedigree from my real light skinned daddy, and he was a Black arts movement poet. He had 2 degrees from Columbia, but we didn't have any relationship with his people because we were too dark for them. They were very light skinned, and they were mixed race. And so the only people that I knew were working class people. The only people that I had love from were working class people. And that's something that I also hid. And so now maybe people can understand why I can write, the vernacular, and I have an ear for it, because that's all I knew, you
It's
know.
interesting. I mean, it's interesting too, though, because like you mentioned your father, and you mentioned your mom was an intellectual and academic as well. The funny thing about it is, when I met you, I was in prison, and so a bunch of people was thinking, "Damn, y'all known each other forever." I thought you went to prison when you were 16. I was like, "No, I didn't actually."
But I
I mean,
met you when you were in your 20s
yeah,
at
right.
the
We
at the
met. We
Convent
met when I was in my
Center.
20s.
Yeah, that was like 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I remember. Yeah.
But I first read your work, and I say I
Yes,
consider
you
meeting
always
people when I
tell me
read
that.
something that they wrote. And so, I read it, I met you through the prisoner's version of a library, which is to say, I have a book I think you would like to read. Let me give it to you, right?
Mm-hmm,
And what's
mm-hmm.
interesting is when you meet people on a page, the only thing you know about them is the words that they've
Right,
written. And so that
right.
always came across to me because I didn't know the
Mm-hmm.
honorary that exists in the world. And I didn't know. So you don't know people's skin complexion. You don't know,
You
you
don't
don't know
know any of that.
academic
You don't
heritage.
know whether they're sedity or
Right.
or whether they're down to earth, you
And
know.
it's the page. And that's why I think that I was just to close that point, I was just saying the power of the book is on the page. You come off as somebody that loves the people that you're writing about.
I
And
do.
and
I
any
love them dearly. I don't
and it,
always
yeah.
like Black people, but I am ride or die for Black people. And I've evolved. I mean, you
And you even
can't
love
just
Diana.
I do love Diane. I love Diane. You know why I love Diane? Because I know it's a very rare white woman, but I know white women like that. I'm friends with white women like that
Yeah.
set their racial privilege to the side and enter Black communities instead of expecting Black people to enter their community. And so
When Allie's mom got mad at her because she was like, "Fuck, she actually don't see color," and
she
it
doesn't
was
see color. And
it was
like,
kind of cool.
that's not, but that's a privilege that Diane, has. She doesn't have to see color.
Yeah,
And you're talking about, because I had a first reader that was like, why is Bill, acting so stank to Diane when Diane, first tries to be friends with her? And I'm like, Bill is a Black woman who was reared in the, from the 1940s to the 1960s in the Deep South. There's no trust between,
Oh, that's
Black
what group.
people.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so, but I also wanted to show, one of the things that I do, and maybe this is because I'm older, for every low down white person in the book, I try to balance with a nice white person in the book. For every low down Black man in the book, I try to balance with a great Black man. I wanted to try to balance, and also, the difficulties like with Lydia's drug addiction. I always tried to show like there's a range of Black experience, even in the Black middle class. That's
Well,
what
and you
people
know the
do
other
not
thing,
understand.
and you know the other thing is that you allow people to fail, and it is really
I
hard.
failed.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
high
but no,
school
I mean, but I think
dropout.
it's hard though to like write a book where I was talking to somebody else about your book, and I was like, fuck, I was like, yo, Honoree's book is badass. Because look,
You're
poets
so
can't write
sweet.
novels.
I'm so shocked
No,
by this. I didn't think
no,
you
because
were gonna finish it.
man, poets, we actually can't really write novels. I mean, the idea of structure frightens us. The
Oh,
idea of
it's a
and,
thing.
and you didn't even just write a novel. I haven't read a book like this before where it made me understand the interconnectedness of slavery to being an 80s baby. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
misconstrue what it means to be an 80s baby because they call me like an 80s baby. And I'm like, no, 80s babies. Like I'm an 80s baby, but when we talking about that era of the 80s, that's
You
people who
were
were born.
born in the 80s, though,
I was
right?
born in the 80s, right?
Right.
That doesn't count. Like we talking
Right.
about
I
people
grew
who
up in the
understood.
80s.
Yeah, and you made the connection from the antebellum period to going to through like the sort of Jim Crow period, but really that connection from antebellum to the 80s, I haven't seen it as cleanly done. And I wonder if you feel like what was behind your desire to actually create such a compelling connection between a period that frequently people say this all the time. Like, in fact, if I was talking about if I was talking about reparations, and I wasn't trying to talk specifically about give Black people money, but I was just trying to say, let me explain to you the legacy of slavery and the impact that it has today. When the professor tells her student, look, you need to shower and pray before you go to sleep. I was so surprised when she got sick because I thought her sickness was from like gluttony, right? And then it smacked me in the face because I've realized too that like as I was absorbing the trauma that was described in the research by Ellie, that I had let it sort of wash over me in a way that I didn't take seriously the emotional impact of those narratives. And so I just wonder what made you connect this contemporary 80s moment in a way that I don't think really has been done before in fiction in this kind of epic scale.
Well, one of the things that, you and I are both devotees of Lucille Clifton. And you know that I had a very special relationship with Miss Lucille. She was my second mother. She was my friend. She was my mentor. And one of the things about her is that she showed a spiritual history, a soul history of Black people in her poetry in ways that I don't think anybody has done before. And so one of the things is that, even though I am, in public, sedity, not so much in private, but in public, I'm sedity. And, I'm a college professor and all of that. Spirituality is very important to me. And I do feel that there are two things. First, I feel like there's something in the spirit that remembers everything that we have gone through as a people here in this place, as Saint Sanchez says, here in this place we call America. But also, I think, and I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but it is what it is. I think that many of us who do this work, you, me, who do creative work, people who do historical research, people who do this, and they focus on particular aspects of our community, come from shamanistic stock. And there's a power sometimes that we can't name with Black intellectuals, Black writers, and all of that. And then when I started doing research, deep research, I've got right here Michael Gomez's African Dominion. When I started doing research going back to pre-colonial West Africa, I started seeing that people who were poets were revered in particular West African societies, people who were historians, people. And so I wanted to show how our history still contains spiritual aspects. And so when you, for example, no spoilers, see Lydia's story, there's a point where her story connects with the ancestors. And
yeah.
And that is the thing. When I think about the war on drugs, I think about it not only in terms of the and you know more about this than I do through your work, more not just in terms of what the fallout was for the expansion of the carceral state, but I think about how great spiritual power in Black communities in the 80s was sort of not destroyed, but driven underground. And that it took, because we see all of this sort of spiritual power when we see the Black arts movement, we see the Black power movement, we see, and that's coming from the civil rights movement. So we see all of this from these people who have, what Native Americans call medicine. And medicine is not simply, healing people scientifically or, medically, but it's also, you have the power to bring people together. So we saw all of that medicine. And then when we got to the Reagan years, and what we saw was this sort of driving underground of all of that power that I think we're now reclaiming.
It hurt me a lot, actually, like thinking about, I got a working in space, thinking about incarceration in the carceral state where a lot of the energy, like we don't have many great songs. So we got like Brenda's Got a Baby that talks about sexual abuse and child sexual abuse and rape. That's some one of the topics that's in the book. And actually you show how this is something to deal with. But I don't know if we had the comparative narrative of like Lydia's struggles. And I think I was telling somebody, I was like, when Biggie says, I'm out here just trying to feed my family.
I was just thinking about him saying that like 3 days ago. That's really interesting.
It's like, what if he finished that sentence? I'm out here just trying to feed my family by creating Lydia. And I think that this is the part of, I was on a call a few hours ago. I was on a call a few hours ago with like a dozen men who all, doing like, most of them were doing life in prison. Most of them have been locked up for 20 years. And the
Mhm,
thing,
mhm.
and the thing that sort of broke my heart at the end was that it's a kind of healing and forgiveness that we don't have access to. And part of not having access to it is not being able to be as eloquent and vulnerable um, as we need to be when we
Yes,
talk about the various ways we committed harm. Because it's really easy for Reagan to be the villain. It's
right.
much harder for, you know, I had a
It's
line in one of my
much harder. Yeah, it's much harder.
yeah,
But I mean, you know how far I've traveled. You know, I used to be one of those people. I was like, if you've been to jail, that's it. I don't want to be bothered, da 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 da. And one of the things, I think sometimes maybe what people are feeling when they read the book is my evolution as a human being and my humanity and my pain, because I learned how to be a much more compassionate person through writing. Roscoe's backstory, Bell's brother, through writing Lydia's story, through writing Dante. Um, I grew up with brothers that sold crack. I
yeah.
dated brothers that sold crack. I ran in a crew. It was me, Black, Scutton Jr. And we
See, you know you're doing it. You know you're doing it right when like people can say your name in public for the next 30 years and we have no idea who they are. It's like, oh yeah, we're Black. Well, you was with who? Well,
use
Black.
with who? But they know them on
Yeah,
Moreland Avenue in
yeah.
Atlanta, right? And so I remember, and also, even though I was a very intellectual child and smart, I'm a high school dropout. I don't have a GED. That's a whole nother story.
Hold up,
I
time out. I bet you got college degrees though.
Well, it's a hustler spirit up in here. Y'all think but you have no idea. It's a
I
hustler
didn't
spirit.
I didn't know
They
you.
have
I'm glad you said that though, because it's a lot of people who need to understand it, who will gain from knowing that Honorée Jeffers, who we haven't even talked about your poetry, right? Who's a wonderful poet, who's a
Thank
legitimate scholar, right? Who's a legitimate historian, and has now written a fantastic novel, like truly a big book. Not, a lot of poets be
all
writing some
right.
mediocre shit. Maybe, a poet when they be writing a book, the thing that we be doing, right? If I write a novel, it's gonna be like Michael and Dante on that joint about
I
the joint
love
about New Orleans
Michael Ondaatje, but
coming
yeah,
through the
I know
slaughter
what you
though.
mean, sort of fractured
Yeah.
and
And they're gonna be
yeah.
like, why is it in a clear narrative? And I'm gonna be like, well, as a poet, I understand that the earth is fractured and we need to lean towards fragmentation and
Oh, that's
understand.
a hustler spirit right there. That's a hustler spirit. But yeah, so I mean, the deal is that's why I'm not a Spelmanite. I'm the black sheep of the family. Spelman kept asking for a GED, and I didn't want to take the GED because we had, remember, I used to be very judgmental, and back then in the '80s, people didn't had GEDs. We looked down on them. So I was like, I don't want no GED. Spelman kept trying to recruit me. So my mother's a Spelmanite, my two sisters were Spelmanites, right? But what happened is Clark College didn't have everything on computers yet. It was all, that's an HBCU. It was all written. And so I was taking college classes and I was on a dual thing where I was in high school part of the day and then I was taking, and so then I just stopped going to high school.
What's cool about this though um is that I really do think people need to understand that like brilliance is not measured
No, it's
by
not.
the degrees that you get. It's not
No,
even
it's
measured
not.
by the kind of literacy you lay claim to, because we all
No,
understand
it's
story.
not.
When I got to this page, and then I want to ask you to just read a bit for the audience to close it
Oh,
with.
okay.
But
All
I
right.
want to say though, when I got to page 677, and it says
677.
it's a note from the Rutledge Family Papers Freedom Library. And when I read Freedom
Don't
Library,
give no spoilers now. Don't give no spoilers.
no, just the
Okay.
idea of Freedom Library. And I got this project and we build freedom libraries, but
Oh
the way in which
man.
I didn't,
think about that.
yeah.
God.
I thought it was just lovely. This idea that libraries, that we can't escape it. Libraries are truly a source of freedom.
They
And
really
when
are. And let me tell you, I'm old school that way. I grew up reading the classic slave narratives. And so, when Frederick Douglass said it was, when I learned to read that I knew I must be free. Coming and I don't talk about my deep personal life on these, but let me just say, coming from the belly of the beast in many ways. Reading saved me. Reading saved me. It gave me a sense of control when I did not have any control. And so when I think back on Frederick Douglass and how he would return, in these autobiographies back to his enslavement, and I think that that's one of the reasons. I just figured that out a few days ago. Why I am, I always return to slavery because there's something about people who are making a way out of no way and they have a complete loss of control, but there's something inside of them that you cannot warp and that they thought about us before we even were born. And so that's one of the reasons. I mean, this book is a monument to them. Another book will be about something else, but yeah,
Get
but
it.
the freedom library, I never even thought about that.
Yeah,
Just
no,
until
this
you
is
said it, like even though I knew it was Freedom Reads and yes. So what do you want me to read? Do you have something you'd like me to read?
the thing is, no, because somebody in the chat asked me to tell you to read something, so I hadn't planned to have you read anything.
Okay.
Because I just planned to talk to you for the hour. So
Okay.
now I was put on the spot, so now I put you on the spot. I'm
So
sorry.
you're gonna put me on the spot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to let me see. I'm going to read something that I don't usually read. And that is JW, the story of JW. It's just a little short thing. And
That
it's
was
about
was cool. Actually, this is a perfect example of how you really deepen people's character, because when you first meet JW, you think a lot of things about him. That's the cat with the stingy brim, actually.
the stingy brand with the blue flower. Okay.
Yeah.
Come on now.
But
Okay.
then
Yeah.
But then when you find out about David working with Uncle Root, you like, oh, hold up. JW was a little bit more complicated than I thought he was.
JW was very
Yeah.
complicated. So I'm just gonna read this this part. This is about, I'm just gonna read, 1.5 pages or something like that. This is about when Jolene and JW's marriage, and these are backstory characters. They actually show up as minor characters in a short story that's in the collection that I'm working on too. So I come back over and over again to these characters. While J.W. James didn't appear to be any older than 25, he was in his mid 40s. Jolene, his wife, while 4 or 5 years younger, was prematurely worn down and had let herself go. She was Marine with skin like red dirt before it's been rained on, or the shade of a ripe peach. Before her 4 children had been born, she'd been a pretty woman, especially by color-struck standards. And JW definitely had been a color-struck man. When he'd been courting Jolene, he'd announced to anybody who'd listened that he didn't like no dark woman, even though he was very dark himself. He liked to tell folks that he had some Cherokee in him, and he wore his curly black hair styled with grease and brushed until it lay down, as if that mattered. Because when JW had been born, the midwife had written Negro quite clearly on his birth certificate when she got around to registering the paperwork with the courthouse. In church, Jolene followed behind her husband with her head down, and her long hair was mostly gray in the old lady bun she'd wore. She'd sit down on the pew with a sigh, but when the elder gave his sermon, Jolene was the first to start shouting. It was the only time anybody saw her with a smile on her face, maybe because JW was a well-known cheater, even though he was a church deacon. Colored folks said he could have been head of the church if he didn't have that other woman in town. After all, his granddaddy had been the very first elder of Red Mound. JW even had 2 children with that mistress who was much younger than his wife. The mistress who left her children alone in the house on Saturday nights so she and her children's father could be seen together at the juke joint out in the woods. Then JW got up on Sunday mornings, bathed, dressed, drove back out to Wood Place, and walked to Red Mound Church to praise the Lord. Unlike Jolene, the mistress hadn't let herself go. Her figure was slim in the tight-fitting, brightly colored dresses she wore at the juke joint. And JW's taste certainly had changed because the woman was even darker than he was and wore red lipstick on her round, full mouth as if to accentuate that not only was she beautiful, she knew it. Her night brown eyes were luminous, and there wasn't a strand of gray in her straight and gleaming hair. The folks in town said JW wasn't the first man to step out on his wife, but the problem was he didn't have no shame with it. That he acted like the mistress in her tight, bright dresses was in fact a second wife, as in the old ways of matrimony back in African times.
Yo, you know what's badass about this book? If you listen on some lower frequencies, you'll see how these narratives keep coming back. Because I'm thinking about my man Zulu, you know.
I'm so glad you got that, right? Zulu with his 3 wives, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah, but they used to do that back in the 70s. You have these brothers and they like, these my 3 wives. We living together. There was a brother that tried to holler at me back when I was in graduate school.
oh no. Oh, wait, no. This is where we get to the part of the conversation that we can't have unless we got whiskey with us and bourbon with us.
Right. No. I'm not saying anything except for he was part of the Hebrew Israelites. And
they had some good. Hey, have you ever had the food in DC?
Oh, man, that vegan food is off the chain, isn't it?
It is serious.
He tried to make me his second wife. That's how they would try to pull you in.
With the
was
food.
In the west end of Atlanta. In the west end of Atlanta, they tried to pull you in with the food, and he was real pretty. His eyelashes were like this long, and he was trying to make me his second wife.
This is what we're gonna end on. So I was trying to make my wife, my first wife and my only wife, right? Our first date was at one of these joints where they were selling books without ISBN numbers, and the food was so good. It was like a 5-hour discussion on Ethiopian queens, but the food was so good that she went on a second date with me. And so
went on a second date, the Ethiopian queens. You know what? I ain't trying to be funny, but you married up. You married up, brother.
All right, look, we're gonna be the first people ever to be kicked out of a public library event because they told me to get off the stage 10 minutes ago. So look,
and then you had me read. Look at you. Questions or this is it?
This is it. But I will say this though, this is not it. The people who watch it, they're gonna spend many a nights with you reading this book, and you just let us know that it's a short story collection to come. I am impressed, truly impressed with your artistic output. I really is an honor. I mean, I've read a lot of books, and it's rare that a contemporary novel like this truly just blows me away and does things that I didn't know.
Thank you,
I would
Dwayne.
do.
I
So,
did my
thank you.
best, and I've known you for a long time, and I've seen the writer, the man, the husband, the father, the social activist that you become, and I'm just honored to know you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys are on.
Oh my goodness. What a conversation. Thank you so much, Dwayne and Honorée. We don't want it to end either. We'd like to join you for that bourbon and more talk. But unfortunately, that's not on the docket for us tonight. Thank you for that, sincerely. Deep, funny, serious, profound. We appreciate you coming into conversation so authentically with one another and in support of a public library system that loves you both so much.
That's great.
Keep going.
So we're filming actually from upstairs of the Stetson Library right now, the new Stetson. And I know the camera's not going to pan around, but this is the area where the teens will be hanging out. We're going to have a brand new makerspace with all the latest technological advances. We'll have a teen lounge with some nice comfy chairs, and of course plenty of area to do study, either with laptops and or with desktops. And so we're very, very excited here on the second floor.
Happen. I'm here in the Young Mind and Family Learning Center in your new Stetson branch of the New Haven Free Public Library, soon to open. This is a destination, this Young Minds and Family Learning Center, for young people and their caregivers from throughout Dixwell and New Hallville. It's going to be a great place full of life very soon. It's possible because of the generosity of lots of people. And it's particularly possible, this branch and all that we do in the library, because of people like Karen Pritzker and the Seedlings Foundation. Karen Pritzker literally provided the launch capital for your public library for our Stetson campaign recently concluded. We have no better friend than Karen Pritzker and the Seedlings Foundation. She is a generous supporter, but most importantly, she's a wise counselor and good friend to the library and to its staff. Listen now to a short video from two other great friends of Karen, two other great leaders in New Haven, sharing some insights about this great centurion of New Haven, Karen Pritzker. Enjoy this video with Roxanne Cody and Eric Clemens.
Simone Weil, the French philosopher, had a quote that I think is really perfect in thinking about Karen. Her comment was that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. It is that attention that Karen brings to her work, whether she's doing editing or writing or philanthropy or as a businesswoman. It just permeates what she does, and it shows up because she makes things happen invisibly. She's watching, she's observing. You might not even know why all of a sudden your life went right or your organization went right, but it's because Karen thought of something ahead of anybody else. And I think her work with the library is an obvious example for us to use. So it's not surprising that a library and books would be a cornerstone of Karen's commitment. She understands how books change a life. But when she started working with Jim Welborn, who headed the library and was inspirational himself, watching the two of them was just magical. Karen understood that not only did the library need to be supported, to have the books, to have the librarians, to have the funding, but she understood that the libraries were town greens, that they were the place that people came and needed access to other information. So what did she fund? she funded throughout the state training for librarians to really be what they are. They're frontline social workers. They're not, you don't learn that in library science class. Karen understood that, and she provided training to librarians all over, and then realized that they could bring nutritionists to the library. They could bring other health issues, food issues, other things that would mean they're in the safe place. They're in the library. The librarian, the library is a gateway to other information that can also change their life. And Karen just, whenever she gets involved, whether it's at Foot School or the Community Foundation, or is one of the founders of Read to Grow, which she named, she's always willing to do the work. She rolls up her sleeves. She doesn't look for other people to be doing it. She's thinking of it. And what she ends up doing is making any of us around her better, smarter, more committed to the fact that we can make a change and create a future that's better. You know, I met Karen, not surprisingly, over books. It was about 30 years ago. Karen was new to Connecticut and wanted to form a book club. So, of course, right away we had a group that was, you know, diverse, different opinions, different ages, and it was a great book club. And when I think of Karen, I think this 30-year friendship, which is something anyone would cherish, and I particularly cherish. I think, of course, she was the seed. Books are the seed from which everything grows. My friendship with Karen's work and commitment to our community. So it's not surprising that the library, Karen has refused to be honored by anybody, but she agreed to do this for the library, for the New Haven Public Library, because she knows it is libraries at their core that will make a future and make people understand their possibility for a future. That's what Karen does.
So when I think about Karen Pritzker, there are many things that come to mind, but three things in particular: the power of hope that she provides, not only myself, community, in the library, but the entire city of New Haven. The power of courage that she exudes every time I talk to her and she convinces me about what's possible, not only for myself, but for community. And the essence of love. That Karen, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, I think they do, if not, they should, that she is a very loving person and takes great pride, quite frankly, in being a loving mother. And so those three things, I think, are top of mind for me as I think about Karen. You know, one thing in particular that I would love to share as it relates to Karen and those three things is, you know, November 3rd, 2020, my wife quickly passed of COVID. And, you know, when I thought of the many calls that I received, the many text messages, the many emails, or even the many knocks on the door, there was a moment for me where I felt incredibly lost. And I was actually in Atlanta, Georgia, visiting my youngest daughter who's at Spelman College. And in the midst of me feeling very lost at the moment, I called Karen. And she answered the phone and said, you know, I was just thinking of you, and had written like 3 emails to you that I just couldn't send. And I called her because I knew, 1, she understood my experience in the moment. 2, because of those 3 things. that I needed a sense of hope. I needed a sense of courage, and I needed that kind of essence of love that she always provides anyone who talks to her. And she kind of walked me through the next hour of how I felt, why I felt, and how I needed to move forward. And in that moment, she, as she has always been, but even more deeply, she became an authentic friend. And so when I think of her, I don't think of her as someone who provides resources for people's dreams and possibilities to manifest. I think of her as my friend, who I know, just like the library knows, that when in need, I can go to her, and she can always and has always provided me with that essence of love and that power of courage and hope.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. Thank you, Eric. As they said, and as so many know, Karen Pritzker has done many things. One thing that she's been part of is a website called My Hero. And I think I can say without reservation, here at the New Haven Free Public Library, Karen Pritzker is our hero. We are delighted that this Young Minds and Family Learning Center is named in honor and recognition of the Seedlings Foundation. And tonight, we are particularly proud to bestow upon Karen Pritzker the library's highest award, the Noah Webster Award. We're delighted that Karen agreed to receive this award and offer some remarks. Enjoy this video from our hero, Karen Pritzker.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone from the New Haven Public Library. I'm truly honored to receive this award. Libraries have been so important to me throughout my life as a person, as a reader, as a journalist, as a documentary filmmaker, but also as a community member. Libraries, and New Haven Free Library in particular, is a welcoming place for truth, for honesty, and for community to gather. And I feel very privileged to have been a part of so many efforts over the years to expand our library system here in New Haven. Whether I was a child, very first library visit, finding the treasure of so many books that we didn't have at home, to first trip on the Chicago CTA, being allowed to go to the Chicago Public Library downtown and having my own card and being able to go myself and spend every Saturday in the library. But so many people in our community have had the same experience of finding both imagination, stimulation, new worlds and connections with other people, because librarians have always been also the key to why libraries are so important, and that they're able to help and bridge a world of knowledge to what's needed. As a young mother coming to live in Brantford and being able to stumble into the library and making a community of friends was, very, very meaningful to me. And that my children had access to everything in the library, and all children should. And I've been so excited by the new branch and the way New Haven has brought in librarians who bring the books to people, the bookmobile, trying to keep hours longer and keep the libraries open. There isn't a better place, especially in our divided society, for people to meet ideas, meet one another, and get accurate information. So I'm delighted to receive this award and to be a supporter of the library. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen.
And thank you to our very special guests, Honorée Fanonne Jeffers and Dwayne Betts.
And most importantly, thank you to two really important groups of people. First and foremost, the staff of the New Haven Free Public Library, including John Jessen and a number of people gathered here, the tireless true centurions of this library. And thank you also to all of you who've tuned in tonight, all who are donors to this public library of your time, talent, and treasure. Do consider making a gift tonight online to the public library in support of Mardi Gras and celebration of this great event. We had our first Mardi Gras party at the public library 25 years ago. 25 years ago. We will be back, we are confident, next year, live, in person, at the public library, in real life, in real space. And one of the reasons we're confident is the stars are aligning. The library's birthday is February 21st in 1887. And next year in 2023, Mardi Gras is on February 21st. Mark your calendars. See you live in person. Thanks for staying with us tonight. God bless you all. And let's all support the New Haven Free Public Library.